Hi, hello, welcome to this episode of Fandom Frenzy with Flash, which is me. I am your host. And first and foremost, I would like to apologize for being absent last week. As you know, life happens, and it just so happened to interfere with all of us last week. Like, Schwade went gallivanting across Germany, and my sister decided to scare the out of my entire family. So, there's only 3 of us. And, cut us some slack, man. On this week's episode of Fandom Frenzy, I'm going to recap the 5th episode of Season 6 of Game of Thrones, also known as The Door. Yeah, you know where this is going. Okay, so first and foremost, I was going to talk last week about Peter Baelish and how I like him even though he's like basically the devil and probably the worst human being in Westeros, and I'm not supposed to like him, and I know that. But there's one thing that I'm pretty sure of, and that's that he's super in love with Sansa Stark because he is a major creep, and I think that Sansa is going to at some point use this to her advantage, which is precisely why she lies about this encounter to Jon Snow later on in the episode. Because although that Sansa has suffered like some majorly f***ed up at the hands of the major houses of Westeros, she also learned from every single encounter, including her time with Littlefinger. And you can see that influence in her facial expressions and her interactions. She's every bit as cunning and deadly as he is at this point. She just isn't willing to play all of her cards yet. Here we have like a 10-minute scene in this episode in which we have nothing but Arya doing Arya things. Like still pretending she wants to serve the many-faced god, still pretending to be like a wannabe assassin. This is punishment because I was happy that she wasn't in the last episode. Like now I get to stare at her being angsty and useless and not even kind of part of the main plot for way longer than anybody else is granted in this episode. I'm sorry, but at the same time, like I'm not sorry. I legitimately, at this point in time, feel like Arya is a completely useless character. She's like the one character that I have yet to connect back to the main plot in my mind. I legitimately don't see how she's gonna tie into everything else. So please, if you have an idea, enlighten me so I can stop being so enraged at the sight of her. She serves no purpose. She is 0% connected to the rest of the plot. Like, Tyrion found Dany, and Sansa found Jon Snow, and Theon found Yara, and Cersei is reuniting with Jaime to destroy their enemies, and Arya's just doing, like, Arya. Even her direwolf doesn't know what the f***'s up. Very mad. Here we see that Theon is a great hype man. Like, the WWE would totally hire him. Enter here, once again, Euron Greyjoy, who, for the record, introduces himself as Euron Greyjoy.
I'm Euron Greyjoy. I claim the Salt Throne.
Which, after several glasses of wine, I found hysterical. I would like to point out that Yara, with the backing of Theon, would have made an exceptional queen of the Iron Islands. And I'm like 105% positive that Daenerys Targaryen would want literally nothing to do with an Ironborn king. So the whole coup is doomed from the start. So the fact that Yara and Theon ended up sailing away with half of the Iron Islands and all of the ships was like the best. Like, the patriarchy of Pike, okay? The Iron Islands are stupid. Yara would have been the best thing to happen to that place ever. End of story. Also, has anyone else thought about the fact that Euron is like 50 years younger than Balon and that Ironborn or not, that's kind of impossible? Maybe? Like a little bit? Dany forgave Jorah and found out that he has grayscale, which, for the record, I think that I have right here. This is grayscale. So yeah, she found out he had grayscale and then commanded him to find a cure. So like, last episode, she set literally every khal across the Narrow Sea on fire and became the undisputed Khaleesi of every band of Dothraki in the Great Grass Sea. And then this episode, she felt bad for someone who betrayed her and accepted him back with open arms. Like, Dany is probably one of the top 3 most influential people in this entire series, and she consistently gets the least amount of screen time and the most plot holes. And I keep thinking, well, next season will probably be a Dany season. Like, how could it not be? And then it never is. And I understand that there are a lot of characters, like a ton of characters, and a ton of story to tell. But I feel as though I'm constantly being hung out to dry on this storyline, like all the time. I don't believe I've ever met this character, but she's clearly an actual Red Priestess, unlike Melisandre, who admitted in the books, but not in the show, that she's essentially just a charlatan. Or this woman is way better at being a charlatan than Melisandre. And if you read the books, then you were already aware of the insane story behind Varys becoming eunuch. But I don't believe it's ever been explored at that depth in the show. So either this woman can really look into the flames and see into the past, or she has many spies. And I'm betting on the latter. Like, she said something to Varys about information being power. And for him, I kind of feel like that's foreshadowing for her character. As we have seen in the past, having a reliable web of spies is just as good as being able to tell the future or see into the past. And if one person knows something in Westeros, somebody else undoubtedly does as well. Bran, you massive up. So it is implied in the books that this cave that they're in is basically a safe place. And while he's training to be the next three-eyed raven or whatever, curiosity gets the better of him, which is to be expected. Like, we have to remember that at this time, Bran is like 12, maybe. I'm not really certain, so don't get mad at me. That's not my fault. But he certainly isn't old enough or wise enough to take on time travel, but we'll get to that later. He also isn't old enough to sit in a cave by himself and not be trusted to not make trouble, because that's what kids do, Stark or not, Warg or not. Except when most kids up, they like break a vase. When Bran up, he gets the last of the children of the Forest slaughtered. Oh yeah, let's also reflect upon the irony that they made the White Walkers to protect them. Like, seeing White Walkers as anything other than a destructive force is impossible for me. I also don't really understand why the Night's King wants Bran so badly. There's a part of me that thinks that since Jon Snow killed off one of his 4 horsemen or whatever, that there's an open position on the White Walker Council or whatever. Considering the majority of people get turned into whites, it seems to me that somebody would have to be like exceptionally powerful to fill that vacant position. And that Bran probably fits the description. Like, his resume is just tops. This is seriously the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I ship it so hard. Oh my god. I have had theories in the past about how Hodor came to be. He's one of the more mysterious characters in this series because no one can explain what happened to him. Like, one moment he was fine, and then the next he wasn't, and we see that from several characters' perspectives as they talk about it throughout the books. And here we find out in a really tragic way, honestly, that Bran sort of, kind of, but not really caused Hodor to become what he is. And there's theories that that was not actually Bran. We're gonna find out more about that later. But as of right now, this implicates that Bran can change the past, which means that he's essentially become Franklin Richards and can bend reality to his will to do whatever the he wants. And if we follow that train of events that have already transpired, in which Hodor is already made into a simple giant, then we can assume that after Bran realizes this, he never alters reality again, even though he could prevent all of the up things that happened to his family. Or he may possibly decide to change something at this point, but that would completely throw off the timeline of the series up to this point. Because time travel's up, man. Like, it doesn't make any sense, and it creates paradoxes everywhere. Bran could change everything, but from what we've seen, he doesn't, which honestly is probably the best choice. This also introduces a kind of power that we've yet to see in this universe, and it doesn't make a ton of sense with other displays of power that we've seen. Like, Bran is essentially now an omnipotent character, and he's little more than a child. So again, basically Franklin Richards. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Fandom Frenzy. Drop us a comment if you have anything to say and give this video a like. Go ahead and share the video with any of your friends that are as obsessed with Game of Thrones as we are, and subscribe to the channel because the three of us put these videos out every week. Almost. It's just, oh, I hate her. In the books and in the show. Hate her. Just, whatever. Okay. I was really hoping that at some point I was going to be able to say patriarchy in one of these. I feel like Tormund Giantsbane and Brienne of Tarth would make the most beautiful, enormous ginger babies. The most adorable.